2024's CPU releases weren't the most exciting of all time. AMD seemingly felt it was safe to take their foot off the accelerator for the 9000 series, and most of the reviews at the time were pretty lukewarm. The only positive takeaway about Zen 5 was its reduced power consumption, which is great for people looking to save on their electricity bills, but it also hints at some hidden performance waiting to be unlocked. So when AliExpress sent me a Ryzen 7 9700X to review, I wanted to see just how far I could push it. This video was sponsored by AliExpress and their Black Friday sale event. Pick up an amazing deal on the Ryzen 7 9700X or one of the other CPUs mentioned in this video and get an even deeper discount using one of my exclusive discount codes. If that's not enough, join the Iceberg tech team to claim up to 10% cash back to use towards your next purchase from AliExpress. The more the team uses AliExpress and completes daily tasks, the more cash back we all earn. Check out the QR code on screen, enter the code, or use my link below to join. The bottom line from those initial launch reviews was that the Ryzen 7 9700X had little in the way of performance benefit compared to the still impressive 7700X and 7700 it replaced. What it did have was efficiency. Efficiency and an almost fanatical devotion to... just efficiency. Being able to attain similar performance to the 7700X at a higher price doesn't impress anyone, but being able to do so with lower power consumption, and therefore lower temps, still doesn't impress, because efficiency without upfront cost savings doesn't mean much to most people. A year on, and the price gap is now down to about £30, so I wanted to see if the new chip's lower power consumption can be twisted into a serious performance gain. I'm testing on a Strix B650E motherboard with 32GB of DDR5 6000 CL30 RAM, a 280mm AIO from Arctic, and an RTX 5090. To tune the CPU's performance, rather than directly overclocking, I focused on Precision Boost Overdrive, dropping the curve optimizer by 20, maxing out the core boost to 200, and then using the power limits to affect performance. My standard starting point for any CPU is Cinebench 2024. I have 3 full sets of numbers from the 9700X, one bare stock with just XMP enabled, one with memory tuned to Buildzoid's lazy Hynix timings, and the last one with added PBO. Even just tuning the memory has a big effect, bringing the multi-core score up from 1100, pretty much identical to the old 7700, to over 1200 points. Enabling PBO has an even bigger impact, adding almost 200 points to the score. Geekbench's suite of benchmarks shows a very different story. For one thing, even at stock settings, the 9700X is a healthy 10% higher than the 7700 in single-core and 5% in multi-core. Tuning the RAM brings that score up by a further 6%, and enabling PBO adds another 1000 points. Geekbench AI has 2 CPU benchmarks. The first is ONNX, whereby neither the RAM tuning nor the PBO boost do much to help, and the second is OpenVino, which is again a subtle improvement, but perhaps a tiny bit more significant. This is, however, burying the lead. The real news is how huge these numbers are in a wider context. There's about a 2/3 improvement compared to the last generation. So I guess this must be where all the R&D money went in the 9000 series. The 3D Mark CPU profile once more shows tiny improvements from the memory tuning, but significantly more from PBO. Again though, the real story is just how much better these results are than the 7000 series. The productivity results for Blender and DaVinci Resolve blew my tiny mind a little bit. Well, not the stock results, those aren't much better than the 7700, but the PBO results are excellent. The Classroom render finishes 40 seconds faster thanks to the higher power limit, and the DaVinci Resolve H264 render finishes 37 seconds faster than the stock results. Multiplayer games can be rough to benchmark consistently, so I've limited myself to testing CS2 deathmatches on Dust 2, and once again the differences between the 3 setups is pretty minor. We're talking a 5% delta from the worst result to the best, so I don't think you need to worry about this too much if you own or are thinking of buying a 9700X for this game. It should, again, be mentioned, even at stock settings, these are about the best results I've personally seen in CS2, breaking even with the 7800X 3D, and even beating it by a few frames with PBO. Awkwardly, the 9700X is actually a frame or two slower than the 7700 in Cyberpunk 2077. That ground can be recovered with the RAM tuning and with PBO, bringing performance up by about 10% or so, but this time we're not troubling the 7800X 3D at all. There's another great result for the 9700X in Spider-Man 2, with stock settings beating the 7700 by a couple of frames, but gaining a whopping 20% from the tuning and PBO boost. The 9700X can actually keep up with the older X3D chip, even beating it slightly in the RT test. Now I really want to get my hands on a 9800X 3D. It's a similar situation in The Last of Us Part 2, with stock settings barely beating the 7700, while the PBO run matches or beats chips like the 7800X 3D and Intel 285K. Baldur's Gate 3 still loves that V-cache, so there's no hope for the 9700X here. In fact, it loses out to the 7700 at stock settings, but the 14% gain from RAM and PBO tuning propels that to above the 285K, but still falls short of the 7800X 3D to the tune of about 20%. Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 is a hell of a scoreline. I have to wonder where the Marines goalkeeper was. The stock 9700X falls behind the 7700 yet again by 5% this time, and tuning only goes so far to redressing the balance. Again though, the X3D chip walks away with it. Hitman World of Assassination, aka Hitman 3, seems to have had a patch to fix its non-functional Dartmoor benchmark since my last CPU review. The CPU and RAM tuning adds about 17% to the standard benchmark result, but only about 8% to the ray trace test. My other CPU data was all recorded with my Radeon 7900 XT, so it isn't really a fair comparison, and unfortunately I didn't get round to updating them. Overclocking the 9700X with PBO can actually be pretty transformative, and in some cases brings this relatively inexpensive 8-core chip in line with the previous gen X3D model. That being said, all pretense of efficiency is dropped immediately. To illustrate this, I went through the Cinebench multi-threaded test at 5 different power limits. The stock setting offers just under 14 points per watt, and each step up in power drops that ratio a little bit further, from 12.6 at 105 watts to 10.6 at 130 watts, and below 9 at 160 watts. Meanwhile, dropping the limit to 65 watts brings the score way up to over 16 points per watt, but with some significant performance cost. Power consumption is now actually below 60 watts, but the Cinebench score is down to only 962 points. You can kinda see why people are starting to draw parallels between where AMD are today and where Intel was over a decade ago. Ryzen's early days saw AMD paving the way for higher core counts, surging to catch up with and eventually exceed Intel in per-core performance, and pioneer technologies like tile-based manufacturing and 3D V-cache. The thing is, most of these advancements emerged with the 5000 series, and while you can't argue that the 7000s and now 9000s are an improvement, none of them are quite as earth-shattering anymore. Given that important technology like Gen 5 PCI Express and DDR5 are all still available on 7000 CPUs, the 9000 series has little to offer except for these ultimately iterative improvements. Yes, in some games and applications, the 9700X can perform significantly better than its predecessors, and playing around in PBO can boost performance significantly, but in other cases you're barely getting an upgrade. On the other hand, if you're buying a whole new PC or moving from an older platform, the price difference between this and the older model is pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. Thanks again to AliExpress for sponsoring the video. Check out the 9700X and other CPUs linked below and use my discount codes to get them for the best price. And don't forget to join the Iceberg tech team before you buy. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.